Welcome to It's All About the Questions, where learning to ask the right questions can help you achieve lifelong success. Now, here to help you ask all the right questions is award-winning author, international speaker, and business strategist, Laura Stewart.
Good morning, afternoon, and evening, everyone, and welcome to the show this week. I am, as always, it's my favorite time of the week to be here with you because I get to bring you amazing guests who help shift my perspective and hopefully your perspective. I love my guests because they come from all walks of life, from all over the world, from all over, because they have experiences in life that really help you make a shift if you are willing to listen and have an open mind during the conversations. And I want to share one other thing that's been going on because I'm really, really excited about this before I have this awesome man on the other end of this camera feed that you're looking at on the show. I don't know if you know this, everybody, but I write for Podcast Magazine, the technology category. And for the October issue, I got the cover. So Kim Commando is the article that I wrote for Podcast Magazine, and it ended up being the cover story. So you can get a free copy of the digital issue just by subscribing podcastmagazine.com/free. And you can subscribe for your own free digital copy. If you want to get a physical copy, which is pretty awesome as well, you can do that too. But for a limited time, we've got free digital copies of the magazine coming out. So yay to me, I'm excited. And Kim Commando, if you don't know her, awesome. And Ira, we're going to be talking about telling a story today and how to tell the story for your business. And if you don't know Kim Commando, she is a master storyteller.
Definitely.
So that's my little plug because I'm so excited. I got the cover story. Got to have a little fun here, right, Ira?
Absolutely.
So everybody, my guest today is the one and only Ira Gostin. And he was introduced to me by a previous guest I had on the show, Ethan Freckleton, who is a master storyteller. And his show is all about storytelling. And he says, you need to meet Ira. I think you will love him, as will your audience. So Ira and I had a couple of conversations, and we could have talked for days, couldn't we have, Ira?
Yeah, definitely.
So he's like, okay.
I think we did.
We did, actually. No more talking. We're going to talk on air. And this was supposed to be a Facebook Live in addition to the podcast recording, and technology just decided that it wasn't going to work. I don't know if it was Zoom. I don't know if it was Facebook Live, whatever it is, but we're still going to do this and post the video up for everybody.
And we're live now.
We are live. And that's the beauty, right? Moving our hands around, we are totally live. Ira, one of the things that I loved about our conversations was your journey. Right? Your story. And you made me realize that my show is all about storytelling. And I never realized it before. I've only been on the air, 5-6 years now, broadcast for 5 years. I had an internet radio show for 1 year before that. I never realized that one of the things I do is unlock the stories for everybody of on who's on my show. And that blew my mind because I never thought of it that way. So can you talk to that? Why it is about story and why story is so important?
And when you said that when we were having a conversation, it just made me smile because your story is your personal journey. And most people don't look at their life as a story. But when you think about it, and a story has these ebbs and flows and peaks and valleys, and it meanders and it moves, that's how our life is. Maybe a year like this year, there's more peaks and more valleys, and a little more meandering and less pants, but it's still part. It's another chapter, and so I think your show, you have this broad diversity of guests come on, and you start this conversation with them, and they start telling you their story, and then you're telling them your story, and it's a cool thing. And what my story has done is come into now telling the story for business. And it's a little bit different than people think of. But from my early roots as a photojournalist, I'm still telling stories. I'm just using different tools.
You wrote an article in Forbes that I'm going to quote from and see everybody. I'm proving that I printed this out right off of the thing. And the article was 7 steps to effectively tell the story of your business. And you're on the Forbes Communication Council on around leadership and everything. But this was interesting to me because I had never looked at it like this before. You said, now it's the time to turn all these adjectives and descriptors into a story, because you lay out a process by which people can figure out their story. But you say, this isn't an elevator pitch or a sound bite. It is the story of your business. It should be no longer than a couple of brief paragraphs. And I had never thought really the difference between the story of your business and an elevator pitch or a soundbite, because I feel like the world has gotten to the point where everybody wants sound bites. Everybody wants the 30-second elevator pitch because you're at a networking event or you're on a Zoom thing and you only have a couple of minutes. But you're saying the story is different than that. Can you expand on that and why that's so important? Because I feel like that is massive, huge.
People think of their story as their elevator pitch. That's the first comment that, oh, you mean my elevator pitch? And I'm like, no, that's not what I mean. And then they go, and what an elevator pitch. I have a friend of mine, her name's Alice Hyman, and she's a sales guru. And she hates the word pitch because to her, a pitch is something, this white spherical object coming at your head. But it's, and I've heard it as a matchbook pitch, like you should be able to write your elevator pitch on the back of a matchbook, except that anybody under 35 doesn't actually know what a matchbook is.
Right.
So an elevator pitch should be designed to have one and only one response. That's interesting. Tell me more. Okay. Now you tell the story. It's just a hook with a worm. And the elevator door opens and the guy puts his hand in the door and says, I'm really interested in this. I'd like to learn more about it. And you trade cards or, cool, out. Doors close, end of conversation. Your story is all of those marketing buzz things, your competitive advantage, your uniqueness, your unique selling proposition, all of those things that became buzzwords in the 90s of how to market your company are pieces of your story. And when you sit down and I struggle with this with clients sometimes because I really want them to be authentic. And then they're like, well, if I'm being authentic, how can I craft this? But it's okay. It's just, it shouldn't be overly slick and produced. And, you shouldn't be carrying little lights around so that lights go on in the room when you tell your story. But,
and music starts.
Yeah. Dun, da, da, trumpets. And, but it should be believable and it should be authentic and it should be interesting. And you should grab the listener's attention and you should be confident. And all of those things come into play to tell that story. And, my clients are mostly in the industrial space. So, you commented on my website about that it was a little dry and it wasn't this fascinating story that you expected.
Right.
And I'm targeting people that I want it to be a little more left brain than right brain. And that's my client base. But when I tell my personal story, it's fun and it's exciting, and I'm having this amazing joyride through life, and I'm having a blast. And when I was 15 years old and decided I was going to be a photojournalist and was riding my bicycle to assignments for my weekly newspaper in the town that I grew up, with my police scanner duct taped onto my handlebars.
I have a total picture.
I just assumed that was going to be the rest of my life, but the industry changed and journalism changed, and I fell in love with Reno, Nevada, and decided that I wanted to stay here, and this was my home, and then became just equally enamored with the idea of public relations and stakeholder engagement and creating storytelling for business. And I love it. I have a blast at work every day.
Now, you had this love of photojournalism, and you shared stories with me when we were chatting about Gene Hackman and race cars and Steve McQueen and all this amazing stuff. And I do love the Gene Hackman story. So we're going to have to weave that in here somewhere because it just blows my mind. But you moved into this arena. I mean, you were with the Associated Press for a lot of years, which I think for a lot of people under 35, they may not even know who the Associated Press is because that's how much it's changed. But they were the preeminent source of news. You know, you had the stringers, you had the journalists, you had the photojournalists, right? But you moved into this realm that, based on our conversations, I never would have pictured you going into, right? So you went into the mining industry, precious metals, mining, all of that kind of stuff. And you took yourself out of, I look at it, out of this world that you wanted to go into and went into a very left brain world, right? Assuming left brain, I always get those two confused.
Yes.
Of like facts, of figures, of things that not most, but a good portion of the world is against because of the environmental impact, but yet they want all of what the mining industry does and creates and gives to us. I mean, how did you make that shift? I mean, there's a story there that I think can help people, my listeners, understand how a story can evolve while making a difference.
Yeah. So, there was a couple steps in between. And one of those was, I think anytime you make a massive life change, you need some kind of catalyst to help you push through that. And so my catalyst was going to grad school and getting my MBA. And at the time, I was going to be a marketing director. And my goal was to become a chief marketing officer somewhere, even though there's only 2 people in Nevada, I think, that have that title. But I hadn't done that much research. So I get through grad school, and there's a piece of this that's really important, which is most MBA programs are pretty similar, and there's a trio of finance classes. There's accounting, finance, and statistics. And in that core, you learn about net present value and the future value of cash flow. And if I'm speaking complete gobbledygook to you, it's your home mortgage, how that money works for you in the future. And I prayed every day that I could get through this. I'm going through grad school in my mid to late 40s. And I'm older than half my professors, but I'm having a great time. And I worked at Starbucks. I completely retired from corporate photography that I had evolved into, and working at Starbucks. And I'm going to grad school. I had a couple marketing manager, then marketing director positions, kind of moving along the chain over a couple years. And I met a great storyteller and met him socially. And he was a retired CEO of a Canadian mining company. And we had a couple conversations. And he wanted to know if I wanted to come help him build a company from the ground up and IPO and become a publicly traded company. And we were going to build one of the largest silver mines in the world in Guatemala. So I said yes immediately, because what an amazing challenge. And that's where it started, with a story about this vision. And so we built this company from scratch. I had been working with entrepreneurs and was pretty comfortable building a company from nothing. And we did it in 60 days. We had temporary building and offices and temps and rented furniture and everything contingent on this IPO, which you would think that getting an MBA, you'd know something about an IPO, and it was maybe a 7-second sentence in class. So know nothing about it. And we go off on marketing, and it's constantly telling this story that we have this vision for this company and talking to investors and having a world-class asset to build this around was pretty cool. The funny part of all this, it was kind of painful. I'm not sure if you'll think it's funny. It was painful for me. Is I barely got
it's
through this.
It's always funny after
for
the
everybody
fact.
else, right? So I barely get through the statistics. This, understanding. I mean, I hadn't taken a math class for 25 years prior to grad school. Journalism school wasn't big on math classes or anything that ended in ology. So I kind of get through with the skin of my teeth through the finance part. And suddenly I work for a mining company, and, we don't move a desk chair without figuring out the IRR and the net present value of the move. And so I actually went to the Colorado School of Mines and took the same graduate level class over in 3.5 days. So they pound a semester class. And, at the end of the day, I'm still a right brain visual guy. So working in Excel for 3.5 days with homework every night was brutal. And then fast forward, I actually have taken that class again in the advanced level for several years down the road, more of a general, not in the resource space. But we wind up marketing the company, and we do an IPO on the Canadian market, and we raise the money needed, and we go to work building a mine in Guatemala. And so the storytelling and the path becomes this. I'm talking to different groups of stakeholders. I've got very, very left brain analysts and fund managers that now have a stake in the company. And then we've got environmental concerns. We've got the whole ESG, which is environment, social, and governance. And then kind of below that is corporate social responsibility, which most people are familiar with. So I'm communicating and telling stories of a lot of different things. And, every day was just fascinating of getting to talk about this. And I fell in love with Guatemala. It's an amazing country, and the people there are really just awesome and great workers. And I haven't been down there in several years now, and I miss a lot of my friends, but It was a pretty amazing ride for 7 years. So
when I think of Guatemala, I think of a number of movies, that have been set in there and everything. But when I think about the culture, and when I think about your story that you just told us about how you went from this creative right brain journalist to basically getting knee deep into creating a company and growing a company and then keeping it running for a long time. I think of stories, deep stories, right? The Guatemalan culture is very much about passing stories from generation to generation, unless I'm completely misunderstanding that, right? That is such a huge part. Even the textiles, everything that they use, it's something that's been passed down, passed on, because the stories tell so much about them as a people throughout history. And my listeners, I know, struggle with this whole idea of telling their story because, one, they may feel that what happened in their past that led up to this moment of this business that they've created, or this business that they're creating, they feel doesn't serve the story, or they're embarrassed or ashamed by something in the past that brought them to where they are. What do you say to people when they're trying to build a business or they have one and trying to grow it, about how do you know what to weave in, what to bring in? Because you mentioned authenticity a lot in what you were talking about, and I think that's critical, but some people are afraid of being too authentic, too real.
Yeah, you have to be human. It's, I think in the late 80s, the B2B, the B2C, those, consumer or business to business things. And I started seeing H2H, human to human. And I love that because especially this year, it's about human connections. And as an example, just to kind of go back to Guatemala for a second, the mining brains, certainly I say we, but I wasn't part of that decision because I'm not a mining person, although I guess I get to claim it now.
I think so. By this point in time, you need to change your story around that.
The people, our brilliant chief operating officer who was building the mine, and our people that were building this decided that instead of bringing contract miners in from another country, so that would mean building a camp and bringing out-of-towners in from Mexico or from Peru, and they work and they rotate in and out, and they do the mining and the construction. We trained Guatemalans, and we created opportunities and jobs for nearly 1,000 people. And some people moved from other parts of Guatemala, but for the most part, we took a quiet farming community and taught some skills and in industry. So, there's a key story within the big story right there. And so I think as a business person, when you're crafting your story, and I'm a huge fan of the whiteboard and colored sticky notes and Sharpies, and because you want ideas, you want single ideas, and what to start brainstorming and really get other people in the business. And the term stakeholder, we tend to only talk to, the executives get together. Well, bring the receptionist in, because that woman or man has an idea about the company, and they're the first people that most people visit with. So if they're not telling the right story, we need to get them on the same page. But they probably have all this opinion that nobody's even asked for. Or, we don't have elevator attendants anymore, but if there's a doorman, like go and dig and find the people that have a stake in the success of your business. If you're a family-owned business, talk to your other family members. Who knows what ideas are lurking beneath the surface that nobody's thought to ask for? And then start putting all these sticky notes up, and they're easy to move around, and you get to put them in order. And then all of a sudden you'll start to see this story take shape. And it's a magical process when you get to do it, because it really, then you start to have this third effect, 1 + 1 = 3, because we've got this story here, and like, oh, you know what? Did you guys remember that, Grandpa's next door neighbor was the guy that had the patent, and Grandpa made him a partner in the business, and he didn't want to be a partner. He just said, look, just take the technology and go with it and buy me lunch one day. And there's all these fun stories that now give personality to what you're trying to build.
Are there some key questions that people can start asking in order to draw out the stories? Because, I hear what you're saying. And I know for myself, I've struggled with how do I tell the story of what it is that I do, right? Besides the show. I didn't, like I said, I didn't even realize till after I talked to you that my show is about telling stories to help people tell their stories, right? But I know I struggle to tell the story. So are there some things that you can start with to trigger the avalanche, hopefully, that will come of information from the different levels of people?
Why, yes, there are. So two things before I forget. When you post this live to you and me video and tape delayed to the rest of the world, I will post a document on the Facebook that everybody can grab, and it's a little PDF worksheet of just to get you started telling your story. So it's a little fill in the blank thing and really basic, but it'll get your thinking. So there's 5 keys that I feel are really important to telling your story and engaging with your stakeholders. The first one is you need to identify your audience or your market. Who are you talking to? And
okay, so let me just stop you right there, right?
Yep.
Because a lot of people say you need to know who your audience is, right? But half the time, nobody knows who their audience is. They think they know who their audience is.
You have to do some research.
Okay.
And it might change. You might be doing a podcast and you think you're talking to one group, and then you do a little bit of research and start looking at the demographics or do a survey, and all of a sudden you find out I'm talking to this completely different group. I've seen it change before, and so it's important. None of this is set in concrete. It all should be kind of fluid and available to change. So determine who you think you're talking to or you want to talk to. And, for instance, in the publicly traded company world, you've got 2 different groups of shareholders. You've got the very technical analysts, professional traders, fund managers, hedge fund managers. And then you've got retail shareholders, people like you and I that have an account at Schwab, and we buy and sell stocks. Very similar, but 2 completely different stories that need to be told.
Well,
so
is there a third and a fourth too there then? I'm thinking that there may be another stakeholder, the people that work in the company and the people in the community.
Yep, absolutely. So now all of a sudden you look at, you've got, going back to Tahoe Resources, you've got Guatemalans, you've got a Reno office, you've got a Vancouver office, you've got employees in all those. So each of those groups is a stakeholder group. You've got vendors. You've got all this big giant mining equipment that comes somewhere, and an engineering company. So you've got to communicate to all of your stakeholder group because it's who surrounds you. And so you really have to do some work on identifying that audience, and it should be audiences. But
okay, is it possible to not have that be the first question? Like if it paralyzes you, if it freezes you up because you're not really sure who it is, can you start somewhere else to start gathering your story?
No.
Okay. I always wanted to ask somebody that.
You have to start somewhere, and the first one should be a little hard. It'll take a little bit of time, but you can, to the point where, like, when we're building, if we're doing a outreach marketing for a consumer product, we actually build an avatar. We'll have Bill Smith, and he is our avatar. And let's say we've got an industrial product. What does Bill care about? And that's kind of the next step. Number two is, what does that person care about? So, go back to the mining company, which is a really difficult example, but each of those stakeholder groups care about something different. So you have to determine, what do they care about? And then the story itself should have one big idea. So what is that one big thing? So if you're talking about, the facility, you're talking about job creation. If you're talking to a group of investors, you're talking about long-term share price appreciation. And they're different big ideas. At the core, they're all about the success of the company. So, and not to get off track too much, but if you look at like a company like Tesla, they have just as many. I mean, they have all the, they're publicly traded company. They have, manufacturing facilities in multiple states. They have a partner that provides, the batteries. So there's a lot of different stakeholder groups that all need to be communicated to. And where if you've got a mom and pop hardware store, you're thinking, we don't have that many groups, but you really do, because you have customers, you have suppliers, you have neighbors. If you have a business partner or a banker, or you accumulated some debt to get your business going, great. But, they're still a stakeholder. So you want to make sure to communicate to all those groups.
Well, and I was just thinking, using that example, when you're telling your story, there might be two different sides of the story. If you're looking at a mom and pop, say, hardware store, there are the DIYers that are, not professionals, but they need to fix their sink or their door, or they want to try to redo their bathroom or paint. And then you've got the contractors who may be coming in because you want that business as well, to buy things, to do things. And how do you bring perhaps those two communities together of your client, your stakeholders as well? Or
you don't have to bring them together so much as acknowledge their existence.
Okay.
So if, you look at, let's just use that example. So you can't have a bunch of employees at your hardware store that can't empathize with the do-it-yourselfer. So, if they're former contractors or a construction person, and they can communicate to that contractor well, that's great. But you also have to have somebody that can talk to do-it-yourselfers. And, we have like one little hardware store left, and it's awesome. And they still, you can buy like a washer or a nut.
I love that. You walk in and you go, I need one of these.
Yep.
And he walks over to a drawer and he opens it up, and half the time they give it to you, or it's like, it's a nickel.
Yeah. And, this particular one has this young woman that works there. And she is absolutely phenomenal. She knows everything in their store. But she is able to talk to customers in a way that they feel safe and they're okay asking questions. And I've kind of watched her just interact with people, and I don't have any stake in this business, or they're not a client or anything like that, but she just comes across as being empathetic. And what a great way to build a customer relationship. And
Feel free to give them a shout out if you want.
Yeah, it's the Ace Hardware in downtown Reno, so in Midtown. I don't even know them. They've been kind of instrumental in redeveloping that Midtown area. I go there once a quarter probably for, a bag full of little parts.
They're really good at story.
They get it. They totally get what they're doing. So you've kind of got that one big idea. You're moving into point number 4, where you've got to create now this story that resonates. And that little hardware store. Are you a community store? Are you for contractors? There's different ways to put yourself off. If you want to be that quick and good, get in and get out, or do you want people hanging around? Do you want to offer free coffee? It's just, there's all these little things that, like, what do you want to be known for? So you start to put that story together. And then the last part is the part that people forget. And it's really as important as the first part. What do you want them to do? So what's your call to action? Is it strictly to get people to go to the website? Do you want them to come into the store? Do you want them to come call an 800 number? Google us, or you have to tell people what you want them to do. And, I don't know how many times I'm on the freeway and I see this engaging billboard for 2 seconds as I'm driving by, and it's got something that made me look at it a little bit longer. And I have no idea what it was an ad for. They forgot number 5. They entertain me for a split second at 65 miles an hour. And I'm not going to get off the freeway and loop back around to go look at that billboard again. So they didn't tell me a story in that short a period of time. Or how many times do you see a billboard where you're driving by and the type is so small, you can't read it?
Yeah, that blows my mind.
They didn't test it.
Even an ad in a magazine or something too.
Yeah. You can't find the website. And so there's all these pieces, but when you get steps 1 through 5 going, it'll move the story in a direction now where it'll really help you to build some structure around it. And then you can kind of have fun as you meander through the different points.
All right. So taking that, what pops into my head is some people that have been amazing at telling story, right? They started out as small things on, let's just use Shark Tank as an example, right? Most of the world has, at least most of my listeners have watched Shark Tank. I talk about Shark Tank in my book because I just think it's a brilliant model. So Bombas, the sock company. And the list could go on. Scrub Daddy, the sponge. It was this story that got created that built. For Bombas, it was buy a sock, give a sock, but that wasn't the story, right? I think the story of Bombas, what became the most requested item in homeless shelters, is socks.
That's the start of the story. What is the most requested item in homeless shelters? Socks. And now it's, Henry Kaiser back in whenever, find a need and fill it. And so how do we do something that's really cool for our community, but we need help paying for it? Hey, what if we did this?
And it doesn't have to be completely altruistic or philanthropic, because not every story is there, but that helps, right? I mean, I always give away a percentage of all of my revenue to different charities and things like that, but that's something I've always done, but I don't talk about it a lot. But I don't want people to think that you have to give away one or whatever, but that's not what you're saying, right? The essence of the story is, and I'm a big person that I feel like if you get something, you need to give. But how do you take that from there? I mean,
I think that they've done a great job of weaving this story in, when the way that they tell the story in their commercials. And also, have you ever seen one of their commercials?
Yes.
So do you remember where you saw it?
Through it.
Yeah. Do you remember where
I saw the commercial?
Yeah.
Since I DVR every show that I watch, I couldn't tell you. It's typically interspaced in some show.
Okay, so
that I'm watching.
I've only seen them on CNBC.
Because you watch CNBC. Okay.
I watch CNBC.
I don't. So I will tell you it's probably ABC, CBS, NBC, or cable network.
But I thought that's an interesting place to sell socks. So they've thought about, let's go through the steps now. Who's our audience? Well, not our whole audience, but let's take this one specific channel and create a commercial that resonates, right? Here's our big idea. The story resonates. So we're going to just talk about the fact that, hey, did you know that the number one requested item in a homeless shelter was socks? So we created a company to do this. And for every pair that you buy, somebody gets a pair of socks at a homeless shelter. And the commercial that I saw most recently was a little bit different. The dialogue was similar, but they had like a pair of fancy socks that were the ones that, we would buy. And then there was a pair of just black socks that are the ones that I guess go to the shelter, but they were contrasting. And so I thought that was interesting that they were going after that business, viewer watcher on CNBC, and then also picking up. I listen to CNBC a lot on Sirius XM, so they're picking up those listeners too.
Well, it makes sense, right? Who wears socks on a regular basis? Businessmen need socks. Businesswomen probably wear stockings. Or although I don't know anymore, it's been a long time since I've had to wear business suits and pantyhose and all that other stuff. But yeah, that's a prime audience. Although in the days of Zoom, where too frequently we're seeing people like not put anything on from the waist down, which I don't get. I am always fully dressed when I'm doing a Zoom.
I have reverted to my days in LA of my Hollywood black attire for Zoom calls. So I think I wore a jacket about a month ago.
Okay, this is my show shirt. I wear it every show. This is my show shirt. I will be very upset when it falls apart because it's the perfect color. It reflects who I am, my beach vibe, the whole thing. It's part of my story, plus the necklace that my mom always wore, that she had also given me one. It says, "Nobody does it better." Just reminds me to be all of who I am. Okay. So a little aside there. So the Bombas story, for people that are listening, what I'm hearing, Ira, is really understanding your driver, which for Bombas was they noticed an issue. Number one, they wanted to make a better sock, right? Because they got tired of, but that seems to have fallen by the wayside, right? They kind of talk about the fact.
It's a secondary thing, but they've also made a better sock, and they get that point across. So it's like, wow, I get to get a better product and do something cool. This is a good thing, and they're exploding. And when you look at the companies that are successful or that get deals from Shark Tank, there's always a great story. Every Shark Tank that gets a good deal, there's an amazing story. And, that's a great place to go and test the whole practice thing, because some of them are very well rehearsed, but the emotions are not real.
Right.
So it's like, hey, I'm going to show you my new cough drop. Raise eyebrows, smile, tilt head. Like, okay. And, it doesn't come across as sincere and authentic. And the panel, the core panelists, they really hone in on that. And, it's still Hollywood, and there's still a lot of stuff built into it. But when you see the companies that get good deals and the investors get excited about it, it's because they came in and they told a great story.
But they also had the business piece to support their story.
And that's part of the story.
Okay,
so
got it. Okay.
That's not, they're not separate. So when Mark says, that's great, but
and that's Mark Cuban, in case you haven't watched the show.
My really good friend Mark. Good to, I hope you're good, buddy. He'll respond now, right?
Yeah, I hope Mark Cuban. Come on, we want to hear from you.
So, but when he says, tell me about your unit costs and what you're capable of ramping up to, and you don't have the answer for that, it means, basically what you're saying is I don't have the whole story here. So if you don't have the whole story and there's parts of the story that are the hidden parts that they're answers to questions. The story should always trigger questions. Wow, that's really fascinating. This is an amazing. I didn't know this. I drove by and I saw the sign for the hardware store, but I had no idea you guys had a whole downstairs that was full of little goodies and finds that I might need to come get. And, every business has all these things, but you want that conversation because it's at the end of the day, the story is to trigger the engagement. And, ultimately, you don't want a first-time or a second-time customer. You want a third-time customer. So if you've got a retail business, you want that customer coming back. And that's where your growth comes from.
And if you have a service business, you want them to stay your customer and you want them to refer other customers to you.
Yeah,
same thing with the retail. You want them to refer.
Yeah, and retail is referral is a huge part of that story that doesn't get really the amount of attention that it should, because referral, you've already got a customer. So if they can tell your story and now bolt on their endorsement, that story now is better than when it started. And that's when it gets legs. And when we used to talk about, especially a public company, you talk about moving the needle. That's a huge thing. That's a phrase that we use internally all the time. Are you moving the needle on your business? It's great doing marketing and PR and investor relations and telling your story, but if you're not moving the needle, you're not growing your business. So you're sliding backwards. And then what's all this for?
You just made me think of something that I haven't been doing that I used to do. Oh my God. It's like so mind-blowing to me, Ira, because when I had my tech services company, right, most of my business was referral. and customer after customer would refer customer after customer. And I remember we got a phone call from somebody who wanted to do business with us. And I was like, oh, how did you find us? And they launched into a story about what one of our other customers said about us. And I had never thought about my business the way it was being described to me. And I used to take those stories, which I didn't think of as stories, and then I'd refine the way I would talk to potential customers, the way my staff and I would talk about ourselves, because we had expanded and grown from what my original way of thinking was about the business. Do you see that happen a lot when you work with your clients, how they either stop growing their story, or the ones that are successful are the ones that can see the progression? I don't know if that question was really clear, because I was kind of formulating it as I was asking it. I feel like that's a key piece. And I if I'm wrong, just say, no, Laura, it's not.
No, well, I mean, here's where you're absolutely correct, is once you start doing this kind of form of public relations, you have to continue it. And for a couple, and I don't mean it just because, the agency, you need to keep paying them, but, I don't care if you take it internally or you have to keep doing it. One of the things that small businesses do that is just catastrophic is they are so busy and they've gotten all this business and they stop marketing and they stop telling their story. And the story changes and they don't update the story. So a couple things that you pointed at that you have to do is the story itself is a living, breathing thing. It needs to be fed. It needs to be nurtured and watered. And I love companies that it's appropriate to do, or I can pull it off. Can't ship a plant sometimes, but I love to give them a plant. It's like, okay, this goes on your desk and you keep it alive because I'm giving you this living thing and this represents your business story. And when you're very successful and you're bursting at the seams, keep telling the story and keep listening to the feedback and see how the story moves and changes. And there will be good times and bad times and, it's all these normal things. But if you just stop, then the perception is where you stop talking.
Cool.
So, if you're Tesla and you stop telling your story at the Roadster, people may not know that you've got these cars that are bigger and they're safer and they're 4 doors and there's room for a child seat in the back and
the range is longer.
All these improvements, but because you stopped telling your story during the hot rod when it was a young woman, young man's car, they wouldn't know. So, again, I'm giving examples that are all kind of drastic, but the subtleties are where your business growth is. So if you, you had a food truck and you were known for these amazing little gourmet lunches in a little cardboard box that people could get, and then you opened a restaurant, but you really didn't do any more talking, you need to understand what people out there are saying about you. Because and that's where like some of the social media sites have helped, because people will talk. And if you don't monitor that, right? So if you're not monitoring your Yelp, you're not knowing what people are saying about you. And it's imperative that you monitor all those things. I love going to a Yelp to go look at something. I'm thinking about going to a place, or I'm going to buy something or use somebody new. And they've responded to every single post. Right. Hey, thanks for that you know what, I'm really disappointed that we fell short of your expectations. Here's my email. Please email me and let's figure out a plan so we can make this up to you. Now,
acknowledge whatever it is.
Yeah. And, good or bad. But that business now has a very solid understanding of what's being said about them. And it's part of the whole listening mode. So there's all these pieces that are part of your ongoing marketing that are all kind of attached to the story itself.
I had a couple of episodes with Janet Shines, Ashlyn Silva, and Heather Margolis, where we talked about like this whole social selling, monitoring your social behavior and what people are actually saying about you. And that just feeds so beautifully with what we've been talking about today, Ira. And I probably need to have you back on to talk more, because we could talk more and more and more. Before I have you share how people can get in touch with you and also get that PDF that you were talking about, I promised everybody the Gene Hackman story. Okay. I love the Gene Hackman story, and you in the seat with the camera, and then please tell this story, because I think it's a great story about story.
It really, so back when I worked for the Associated Press, I actually got into photography through motorsports and sports car racing in particular. And those of you that know a little bit about racing, it'd be like SCCA racing. And I grew up in the Bay Area near San Francisco. So Sears Point Raceway was my home track, and Laguna Seca, and started the very first Long Beach Grand Prix. Went down there. Well, it was the Toyota Grand Prix of Long Beach was the official name, and Toyota had the celebrity race as a ancillary race, and so now you have to understand this is before GoPro and digital. So I'm trying to mount a Nikon motorized camera into a Toyota Celica to photograph Gene Hackman, and I can't get the camera to set right, and I'm rigging it, and I've got brackets and safety, and I can't get it to work.
And it's not a typical Toyota Celica. It's a road race tricked out.
There's no seat on the driver's side. So we basically I think I had like somebody's sleeping bag out of the back of their truck and a pillow or something. And now I am sitting backwards on the floor of this car
in the passenger
with
side,
no seatbelt on the passenger side, facing the driver, which is Gene Hackman. And he's got an open face helmet, so you can see who he is. And, Gene has now decided that it is going to be up to him to completely turn me upside down. And he is going through turns, and I am gritting my teeth, trying to shoot pictures. And the picture somewhere in archives somewhere is, he's crossed up with the steering wheel like this, and we're sliding through this turn, and I'm trying to stay put, and I'm and of course, a roll of film only had 36 frames. This was struggle, people. This was real. I only had 36 frames to get the right picture. And it's not like where a digital card now holds 250 frames. And we are sliding, and it was this whole thing, and he just was having the best time trying to get me to flip upside down in the car. And it was, you just worked out trying to make it happen.
But then you said you saw him years later or something, and he's like, you look familiar. And what did he say to you?
So he looked at me, and I said, that I had photographed him at the Long Beach Grand Prix, and I can't remember exactly what he said. And it was like, oh yeah, I remember that kid. He goes, yeah, that was fun. And
he was trying to make you pass out.
Like he was honestly trying to get me to pass out, just pulling enough G's, sliding around on the deck of this car. And I photographed, Jay Leno, and there was really a period of time where the all the celebrities, the A-listers, really wanted to drive these cars in the Grand Prix, and it kind of waned a little bit. And now Toyota is no longer a sponsor, and things changed. There wasn't even a race this year because of COVID. So, and it's it was a pretty memorable, fun thing. Motorsports was a blast, and I miss that. But every once in a while, I get my camera out and go shoot pictures of something.
The reason I wanted you to tell that story, Ira, is because I think it exemplifies who you are as a storyteller, right? You might not have realized it at the time, but your story while you were in the car in that moment with Gene Hackman, maybe you know this, but this is what I saw as your story. Your story while you're in that car on the floor, knowing you have to get this shot, you're being paid to get this shot, was, I'm the guy that's going to get this shot no matter what. I have to ignore all this other stuff. This is who I am. I'm going to get this shot. And years later, Gene Hackman sees you and he remembers the story of tenacity of this person that he's trying to shake up, but couldn't. And then he remembered this. Now, he's had his photo taken how many thousands and millions of times?
Yeah.
But he remembered you. And isn't that what you're trying to teach people? What you
at the end of the day, that's exactly. It's how do I make myself memorable or my business memorable? And that's what the storytelling is all about.
And it was being authentically you, because that's who you are and who you were as the photographer. So that story came through because it is who you are, who you were, who you will be. Always is this person who will get that shot, will tell that story, will make that person look the best they can because you unlock who they really are. In that moment with that photo of Gene Hackman, right, with his arms crossed, as you said it, going around the curve, you got the story of this guy that wanted you to black out.
Yeah.
But this guy who was having total joy behind the driver's wheel, right? And that's, to me, who you are and how people can tell their stories. So thank you. That's why I want you to tell Gene Hackman's story.
It's, and there's, I loved living in LA. I was, it's changed. This was all before paparazzis, and we got time with celebs, and they gave us a couple minutes, and you worked really hard to make a fun picture that, showed them off a little bit too. And it's changed, and it's different, and it's not better or worse. It's just different. So, but it did give me that bite of the apple of telling stories, and it was anytime I could be around a racetrack, it was always a good day. Cool.
Because telling a story shouldn't just be about the person telling the story. As you said, it needs to be to move the stakeholders and let them see the value to them as well. If you just tell a story and it's all about you, then what I've seen is that the brand doesn't survive. The business doesn't survive.
Yeah, and I mean, I think that's a really important part. We didn't really touch on that, but it's not a me story. It's, if you're telling the story of your business, you have to craft it from the business's voice. The business has a voice, and you have to develop that. And it should be the business talking, so that it's not about the teller. It's about the business talking to the recipient of the story.
Cool. All right. So I'm going to have you back on, because we have so much more to talk about brands and stories.
Anytime.
Ira, how do people find out about you? How do they get more information if they have questions?
So iragostin.com. It's IRAGOS as in Sam, TIN as in Nancy.com is the website, and you can email me from there. And I will post on the Facebook page the little worksheet about how to start telling your story. And I'm on LinkedIn and Facebook and Twitter, and you can find me.
Okay, and it's Ira Gostin, IRAGOSTIN, iragostin.com. And Ira, I had so much fun with you today. Thank you so much.
Yeah, it's been great. So I'm sorry that you and I are the only ones that are doing this live, but everybody else, you'll forget that it was taped.
Well, what I'm going to do is normally I wait to post the video till I have my front and back done by the amazing Joshua Badibar, who does my video graphic stuff. I'm going to post this up into the Facebook group so people can see it right away, and then I'll repost it with the front and back saying it's all about the questions, just so people can see this, because I'd promised everybody out there. And then the audio goes to podcast as always. Every week I do the show, it goes up to all the major podcast platforms. And because, Ira, you said to me, to my listeners, that it's very important to do that last part, which is, what do you want them to do? There's two things I want people to do. Number one, I want you to comment. I want you to share what nuggets you've gotten from my time here with Ira, because sharing a thought makes it more real than if you just let it sit in your head and do nothing with it. And then wherever you're listening to this, if it's on YouTube with the video, if it's on iTunes, Spotify, Stitcher, Alexa, wherever you may be listening to, subscribe, rate, and review, and share these posts to get more people listening to it. So that's my call to action. How is that, Ira?
Perfect.
Okay.
Please do that, though. Yes, because it's important that all the shows that you like get a little love and get people to join. And Laura's show is amazing, and you're never going to find another show that has the diversity of guests as Laura does. So it's cool stuff.
Well, thank you, Ira. That means so much coming from you. And we're going to set up another day to chat. Let me close up the show today. Everybody, I hope you've learned one new thing or had a new perspective. There were several times on the show today I had goosebumps. I don't know if you could see them. This is my love of my week. No matter how bad I'm feeling when I do my show, I uplift because I get to be with these amazing people like Ira week to week. And you as my listeners, I love to hear from you. Please let me know what you think of the shows. Share it, subscribe, and most of all, take action. Do something to tell your story to the world, because I know you all have amazing stories out there. And remember, the right questions can change your life. So what are you asking today? Have a great day, everyone.
You've been listening to It's All About the Questions, starring Laura Stewart. Connect with Laura at it'sallaboutthequestions.com and download a free workbook that will help you ask better questions starting today.